Hello, everybody. My name is Kate. I go by Ghosty Online, and today I'm just making a video with a little bit of story time. Um, Wanted to kind of talk about a time in my life where I was a little younger and I had a little more, I guess, freedom in my heart and a bit more of a desire to experience the world in different ways. So, this story goes way back when I was I think I was 19 at the time, and I was living in College Station, and there was a friend of mine who lived in Georgia at the time, and so another friend who I've talked about previously, Jacob, him and I made plans to go and visit our third friend, Mark, down in Georgia. It's like a 22 to 26 hour drive, depending on how long you want to take, and that's just me estimating from my memory because I remember it took us more than 24 hours, I believe. I want to say it took us more than 24 hours to get there, and that might just be totally wrong because I haven't looked up the times. But if memory serves correctly, Jacob picked me up in College Station, and him and I kind of just took turns. Every 3 hours or so, we would switch off. I'm gonna say 3 to 4 hours. We'd switch off driving, and we shot the trip down without stopping, basically. Of course, we stopped for like food and gas and stuff like that. And I guess that trip that Jacob and I took is sort of a story in and of itself. But we had a really good time just in that drive. And we finally arrived in Georgia. And I'm gonna try to not be specific with locations and dates and stuff like that. Um, but Jacob and I arrived, and it was kind of cold, which was really nice. We were able to wear like pretty heavy jackets and stuff. We were planning on being there for a few days. I think we were there for like 3 or 4 days. I don't remember exactly. Um, but our entire plan was centered around our friend's birthday. So while we had plans to basically drop acid at some point during that, I want to say it was like an extended weekend. Um, we had plans to take LSD during that time period, but that wasn't really like the central focus of our trip. We were really there to uh, celebrate with our friend, and this was actually my first time meeting Mark in person. And if I think back, actually, maybe the only time I ever saw him in person. But anyways, we had a couple days where we were just kind of like exploring. Like we drove into Atlanta. Um, we kind of went shopping, but I didn't. You didn't really buy anything, but kind of looked around, and we had a good time. And I think I want to say it was like the second night that we were there. We decided to take our acid, which was kind of an exciting experience for me. Obviously, my first time. So I guess it's kind of important to understand like the situation that we were in. We were kind we were uh, I'm trying to be as non-specific with locations as possible, but we were in near the woods, and we were in a travel trailer. Jacob, Mark, and me were staying in a travel trailer next to Mark's parents' house, which was a fairly large house. So we basically had access to the travel trailer, which was essentially where Mark lived at the time, and we were kind of enjoying the woods a lot, if that makes any sense. So we took our acid, and we were planning on like pulling an all nighter. Right, it's a 12-hour experience for the most, like 12 to 16 hours, give or take. And we had been smoking, and we had we had done some drinking the night prior, nothing crazy, but we planned on not drinking that night. And I recommend this for anybody who's going to try acid, who's going to drop. Um, I wouldn't recommend drinking. I think having some weed on hand is really helpful, especially if you're the kind of person who is prone to being anxious or having anxiety attacks. Um, yeah, so I think that we were kind of just like smoking throughout the night and kind of keeping ourselves nice and mellow. So one of the first experiences that I remember um, really hitting me you get the spinal drop or whatever, and Mark and Jacob and I decided to go sit outside. And something that I wasn't used to, living in College Station and having lived in Houston prior to that, was being able to see stars out at night. Obviously, I've been camping. I've spent many nights in the woods, and so being able to see the stars at night is something that I've always loved and very much appreciated. And so, sitting out kind of in the woods in Georgia and tripping on acid, I was able to look up at the stars, and it was amazing. I still very, very vividly remember um, how everything looked. But it was, the longer I looked, the more it looked like it was like sort of grid. Like there was a very uniform pattern to the way that the stars were laid out, and I could almost see like lines, almost like you would see a map of constellations. Like you could see lines that demonstrate where the constellations made, and I was starting to see lines almost like that, but they were so uniform. They were so uh, almost perfectly spaced in a square sort of grid pattern, and I was like being tripped out up at this as I was looking at it because I had never known stars to look that way. Beautiful nonetheless. All of them kind of varied in brightness as stars usually do. And I was sitting kind of half laying. We were kind of on a hill. As I was looking up at the stars, Mark kind of nudges me, and he's like, "Look out there," and he points out to the woods. And at first, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, but I see kind of a little glint, a little glow in the woods, and he's like, "There's some coyotes out there," and I look longer and longer, and I never really see the coyotes, but I can see like their eyes, kind of picking up light as they pass by, and they never came close enough for us to see them clearly, but they were like kind of in the tree line, right? And I was kind of spooked, but in like a fun way, right? Like even when I'm tripping a coyote, I wasn't scared of a coyote, but it was like, wow, I'm like really in a part of nature, and it was an awesome experience. And maybe I was seeing more pairs of eyes than were really there. I've never been the kind of person that whenever I take a psychedelic, I hallucinate to the extent of seeing things that aren't there, right? Like, I've never seen Puff the Magic Dragon or whatever, but if I look at something that is there, my mind may warp it to look a little different, or may warp it to look like something else entirely for a brief moment. Um, so there may have been, I may have thought there were like 12 coyotes whenever there was maybe one or two, but it was a really cool experience nonetheless. So we eventually it gets kind of cold, and so we decide to go inside the trailer and engage in some different stuff. I started sketching, and at the time, Darling in the Franks was very popular, and so I sat and drew a little picture of Zero Two, which I still have actually. I'm kind of proud of it because I did it without a reference while I was tripping on acid, and it turned out pretty good, as far as I'm concerned. And I got done with my little drawing and stood up, and there was like a full body mirror on the bathroom door. So I got up and I went to go to the bathroom, and I caught myself in the mirror. Right, I saw myself in the mirror and got caught by it. I was stuck, and I want to say that I want to recommend this trying to look into a mirror whenever you're tripping, because I've read and I've heard that a lot of people struggle with it, struggle with looking in the mirror whenever they are on a heavy dose of psychedelic of any kind. But for me, I looked in the mirror, and it was like I saw me. Um, so much of the time whenever I'm looking in the mirror, I know, and I'm partly aware of my own insecurities and my own desires of to look a certain way are influencing the way that I'm seeing myself, and I'm really hard on the way that I appear. And so whenever I was tripping and I looked in the mirror, I saw myself for me, for like, in the best way to say it would be, I saw myself the way that I think other people see me. Um, and that was like a really enlightening experience. Um, I still think about it like it was a heartwarming experience. And I'm not going to say I was necessarily happy with what I saw, but it was like a perspective change. Um, and yeah, I still think about that a lot. And I think about I've taken other psychedelics, I've taken acid at different times, but I think fundamentally what it really comes down to is like sort of a psychological toil, like a battle almost. You are fighting these invading thoughts. At least for me, as a person who has ADHD and deals with depression, other mental health issues, it's a battle. It's a mental battle. Can I overcome these intrusive thoughts? These thoughts that are constantly racing, coming at me at a mile a minute, and I'm having a million thoughts in the span of 2 milliseconds, moving on from one thing to the next, not even able to keep track of it. It's like a test of mental fortitude, and in a way that it's fun, but it's also enlightening. It's like eye opening. You have these realizations whenever you're taking psychedelics that are thoughts that you wouldn't normally have, thoughts that generally wouldn't occur to you. Um, and that to me is the most valuable part of it, not just fun, silly parts that come out of it, which is also kind of valuable. I feel like it's like especially for people who really struggle with mental health issues, maybe it's a good way to unwind if you don't go crazy taking it. Um, but so I going back to the story, I had that experience where I looked in the mirror, I saw myself, and I remember we kind of just hung out and we were watching like anime and shows and stuff for a while. But towards the end of the night, another memorable thing from this event for me was taking a shower, uh, and it wasn't a warm shower. It was in fact an incredibly cold shower. Uh, and if you've ever been in a normal sized travel trailer, it was I would even maybe describe it as a smaller travel trailer. Those are not large showers. It's a pretty small area. Um, the bathroom in and of itself was an incredibly small area, and so I climbed in to take a shower, and I remember like feeling totally enclosed, and the water like freezing cold. It was a cold night. It wasn't that warm in the in the trailer, and then I get smacked by this ice cold shower. And at first, I'm kind of just shivering, but after a while, I kind of get used to it. And I don't know how exactly to describe this. And this is maybe the only time that I've had an experience like this, actually, now that I think about it. But when I was taking my shower, I got the sensation like I was kind of like rumbling almost. And maybe they were moving a lot in the trailer and I was kind of feeling it. But to me, it felt like the shower itself, not the bathroom, but the shower was like starting to move and shake. And I was like, had this realization, even though it wasn't true, had this realization in the moment. I was like, oh, I'm in the shower, but this is a spaceship. Uh, fuck. Like, that's not good. I'm in a spaceship. I don't have, like I was freaking out. I didn't have like my equipment or my necessities. But I wasn't freaking out to the point where I was getting out of the shower. Like, at that point, I had gotten past the pain of the cold shower, and I was like into the portion of weirdly enjoying my shower. And so I was like, oh fuck, I'm taking off in a spaceship, but I have to take my shower. And I didn't like wasn't really in a rush to get out. I don't know exactly how to, like I said, I don't really know how to describe this experience. And then whenever I stepped out of the shower, I was like, oh, I'm back. Like it was like I'm stepping out of my little spaceship shower. And as soon as I left the bathroom and I was back in the company of my friends, I realized how silly the entire delusion was. Like it was crazy, and I immediately tried my best to explain it. Of course, if you've ever taken acid, you also know that speaking doesn't always come the easiest. But at this point, if I remember correctly, it was kind of like almost morning, and we were starting to kind of wind down a little bit. Um, but yeah, like interesting experience. Personally, I wouldn't recommend doing LSD as your first like harder psychedelic. Like before that, I obviously had smoked and stuff like that, but uh, I had never taken shrooms. I had never taken like anything natural or anything like that, and I have now, like I have in the past now at this point. But my first real experience with like a hardcore psychedelic was with LSD. For me, it went really well. I had an awesome experience. But I honestly, I can't even recommend it for everyone in general. Um, I think it's important to try most things, especially if you're interested to try things once, decide for yourself, that kind of thing. But I know people who have taken it multiple times and they just don't. It's just not for them. They just don't like it. They've tried it wanting to like it, going into it with a perfect set and setting and a good mindset, everything's fine in their life, and still coming out with a negative experience. So I really can't recommend it for everyone. But for me, it was an enlightening experience. Um, it was like a perspective shift in a lot of ways, and I think that is very valuable. It's not the only time that I've dropped or taken a psychedelic and it had some kind of perspective change, some realization, something that really affected me, something that really makes me like want to change, want to. I don't know. It's difficult to describe unless you've personally experienced it, but you know, they in writing, I think it's called the Gestalt shift. Whenever you are going about your normal day and whatever, and you have an experience, or you have a thought, or read a book, or whatever it might be, and you have this sudden, like almost palpable shift of mentality, um, and that's a lot of the value that I find in psychedelics. I also think that whenever you're taking something, uh, especially stronger like that, it's very valuable to have like an intention whenever you're taking it. So I won't go into too many details because maybe I'll tell the entire story later. But I've gone into tripping experiences with the intention of basically overcoming my writing issues at the time or other creative endeavors at the time. And I think it can be super valuable for those things, especially when you're in a break. So yeah, that's my story. That's my experience. Again, I've done it a few times. I'd have to think about it and and count it out to know exactly. And so maybe I'll tell some of those stories again, some of those stories in the future. But yeah, that's about it for now. Thanks for watching.